Two cornerbacks, both from Kansas schools, one Kansas State, one Kansas. And today we're going to break both of those players down in today's video. So let's get right into it. So today, yes, we're back with another breakdown of video, and we're going to try to keep this on the same timeline as our past breakdown videos. But the difference is it's two players in one video, which is going to make this difficult, but we're going to do our best. It's officially crunch time. It's April, so we got to get to a lot of players, and we're not going to get to all of them. All these players that I take notes on, it's just not going to happen. It's already has been the case. But I want to talk about specific players that you want to see. So make sure you throw those in the comments below. One way to potentially go through this a little bit faster could be putting two players in one video and essentially comparing the two guys. Now, unfortunately, this isn't going to be a perfect science because once I dive into comparing the two players, we get guys that may not be graded similarly, in my opinion, which leads to a problem because it's not like, oh, this guy is right next to him, so which one do I put above the other? But in terms of how other people grade or rank these players, it could lead to these guys being in very similar categories. So today we could talk about what separates the two, what makes them different, where do they fit, right? How are schematically they going to fit different in the NFL, and what is the outlook for me on these couple of guys? And that's exactly what we're going to do today. I'll have my final grades at the end. If you want to see more of these breakdown videos, that entire list, all of those players have a video, so check those out. First off, we have Cobee Bryant from Kansas, a little bit more experience, 6 foot 180. That's what he listed in as. May have played a little bit lighter during the season, and he also ran a 4.5 340, which is not ideal. For the past few seasons, he's had fantastic production. He's had 13 interceptions. Now, the problem with this is that 3 of the 4 interceptions he had this past year were all against Houston, and about 2 of those 3 interceptions were not that impressive to me. The third one is a little bit more impressive, the way that he tracked the football, kind of broke off his route late, but ultimately none of those were that impressive. They were just horrible decisions by the quarterback, but the production is there. It's Cobee Bryant unique to me is that there are certain things stylistically that I don't want to constantly ask him to do because I think I'm going to leave those opportunities for him to be exposed more than anything. But when you put him in spots that he is comfortable, I think he can actually translate pretty well. How high is that ceiling going to get to? That is a little bit of a question mark, but I think without a doubt, he can bring an impact to the team that puts him in the spot that he can be successful. And you play him in the coverage assignments that are going to work for him. I don't doubt that this guy can be a productive player at the next level. And he plays with a fiery energy that everybody is going to love. It's an instinctual feel to his game. It's the way that he overlaps coverages. It's the way that he works in zone coverages. He works top down. You put him in cover 2. The way that he balances things with eye balance between the quarterback and his man, but also the way that he kind of steps through routes. And as a run support piece, or even on screens, for example, it's the energy that he plays with, his willingness to step in and make a tackle, the slither that he brings to avoid blocks, which is actually very effective. I have him as a good run support piece, unexpected based on his build, but he has that. He shed blocks actually pretty well because he's so slippery. And as a run defender, while in open field, there's some leakage he'll give up as a tackler just in general because of his build, he typically does finish, right? He does wrap up as a tackler. So at least some reliability to his game as a run defender. He may never be special in this category, but he's a plus player. And at his build, that's going to be one of the bigger concerns. He obviously reminded me of a guy like Emmanuel Forbes over the last few years because, again, this drafting, we haven't been doing this deeply, so I don't have like a huge database of guys I can pull from. But I do think of Emmanuel Forbes, right? Another slender build, guy that ran much better. Obviously, he was a first-round pick, hasn't really worked in the NFL, but he was a guy that was instinctual. He had a lot of ball production. He would jump passes, jump routes, right? He would play fast. That's the kind of vibe that I also got here from Cobee Bryant. But obviously, maybe it's not some of the upside in terms of just the athletic traits in general. Now, I do think that the weird thing here is that when we get to Jacob Parrish, I actually have a higher play speed grade on Cobee Bryant than Jacob Parrish, who ran a sub 4.40 as a good grade here. And that's because when he's in spots that play to his skill sets, he actually does play with good play speed, which is fantastic. And you have to get those in those right spots. That way you're not putting him in spots that are going to expose what he's not great at. For me, a couple of things here. First off, he can trace routes when he gets in the trail positions. It's fluid, the way that he can kind of lean and bend through routes specifically. You'll see him kind of run through some of those half-turn transitions, for example, as well. Now, he doesn't have some of that recovery burst or even that long speed, maybe some of that makeup burst. That wasn't super noticeable to me early. It took time where initially I was like, that could be concerning. What is his play speed at? Because I didn't look at the 40 coming in. And then ultimately you look at it and you're like, that does make sense. And the more you watch, the more like, I could see how this could be a problem, right? Even as in terms of the plant and dry burst, I think it's just average, but I think he sets himself up early. He shows some knee flexion. He shows some wiggle that way he can step down and drive on routes. He sets himself up a little bit early there. There's an anticipation to it, and there's some balance to it where there's an aggressive eagerness to jump on the ball. So it makes him play faster than maybe he even is, or maybe that burst really is. And I think you'll see that as a press corner when he has to transition out of press. You'll see the ground that he can give up, how it can break a little bit loose, and maybe it doesn't stay with the same connection or same sustain that you're looking for in terms of that burst. But you'll see from off coverage and zone where he tends to kind of thrive in those spots. Now, in terms of ball skills, as good as that production is, from the games that I had went through, I have him as slightly above average in terms of ball skills. I do like that there is seemingly plus length here at the catch point. He seems to maximize that well. He stays in plays late. I love all of those things, and he even brings some competitiveness at the catch point where, yes, he will be flagged, but he's going to battle guys. He's going to battle them out of bounds. He's going to try to keep it from being like, hey, it's a clean catch opportunity over the shoulder. You got it. He's going to make guys work for that. And even though he's not overly imposing, which maybe doesn't show up as much at college in terms of flags, it can in the NFL because he can be a little bit inconsistent just tracking the ball downfield for me, squeezing the receiver, finding the ball on top of that. Those two things I thought were kind of concerning for me, and that can lead to flags, but also could just lead inconsistently to finding the football. But ultimately, he's going to make you battle at the catch point, and because of his size, it didn't feel like overwhelming, so I don't think he got flagged maybe as often as he could have potentially. But ultimately, there are things that I do like about his ball skills, and that brings me to the coverage types. For zone coverage, I think he's a very good zone coverage corner. I like the balance he plays with in cover two, specifically the way that he balances wide receiver one, wide receiver two. He wasn't constantly asked to just funnel things inside. He would step in between wide receiver one and wide receiver two. He could play more. It's kind of that field side corner where you could give him a little bit more room to work with. Specifically, some may consider him at slot. I don't know that I'm there yet because I don't trust him as much in some of the short area, just staying connected consistently, especially if you're trying to ask him to get physical with guys off the ball. But he does bring some of that blitzing capability and, of course, the run stopping ability as well. I just didn't think his burst as a blitzer was fantastic either. But his route awareness, his zone coverage does stand out to me. Has to jump off his routes. Now, there are little things that I didn't love. Like I felt that he could be a little bit tight when he was working in kind of the half-turn coverage assignments, being able to flip out of those positions specifically. I also thought there was some unnecessary, like the way that he kind of overlap in terms of coverages, kind of work quarterback size way too far beyond actually reading through the route. You would lose some discipline. That was the big thing for me. I didn't always feel like there was zone discipline. You'd see it in quarters coverage where he'd kind of carry like a vertical route, but he would completely give up his blind spot. Little things in terms of discipline that can show up more in the NFL are the biggest concern I have in zone, but I definitely thought that's where he thrived. And then in off-man coverage, I think he's good in off-man coverage as well. Like the short area control for me in terms of gaining connection was a little bit inconsistent. I think he also sometimes needs to play faster, like squeeze the route, take it away. It's goal line, it's red zone. Like you can't let these things happen. He's a little bit high. He's kind of high-waisted in his movement skills. Now he does, I think, kind of minimize that a little bit in half-turn coverage, but if he's, kind of in a base alignment, he could be a little bit more high-hipped. It could slow down some of the transition movement skills as well. But ultimately, I like the angles that he takes early. I like the way that he sets himself. I like the readiness to step down. I like some of that wiggle that he carries in the lower body to drive on the football. So I think he's a plus there. Then in press, I have him as average to slightly above average. It's one of the weirder spots for me because in terms of like on the field, I didn't think it was that bad. But ultimately, that's not the spot that I'd want to put him in consistently. I think that's going to translate to be potentially much worse at the NFL specifically, just because of the way that he plays those press alignments. He's going to lose some connection off the ball. That's a problem. He also will declare his hips necessarily because he's trying to stay on top of route and try to play a little bit tall in the waist, but he does unlock his hips early. Square on his jams at the line of scrimmage. He strides out of single step release type. So he actually had more success here than you would expect for that kind of grade. I just don't expect it to translate incredibly well. I think that his football intelligence was honestly closer to average, which is one of my big concerns. Obviously, his praise stinks isn't fantastic. I don't think it will get there, but ultimately, he does a lot of good things well. And the biggest positive that I'll give for him in this case, comparing to Jacob Parrish, is I think mental toughness is good. I think he's a mentally tough player. He's pretty well seasoned. You put him in spots that he's going to be comfortable, and I get the sense he's going to have a higher floor. It's just about the ceiling for the player, which is the question. That moves me to Jacob Parrish, and Jacob Parrish is in a much different spot because as well as he's tested in, as well as those combine scores will suggest, I didn't think he played nearly as fast as what those times suggest. Listed in at 5'10", 191, he showed pretty good length in terms of 31 inches for a guy at his height. 4.35 40, the 12 bench press reps, the 37.5-inch vertical. I love all those things, but the concern for me is the play speed came out as average, and I didn't touch that, right? I went through it, and I could have bumped this just based on that time alone, but I made that grade before I even knew what his 40 time was, and that was a concern for me, is that that's what it showed up as. The thing for Jacob Parrish is he's young. He's only 21 years old, and I think it's very clear that he plays like a young player, right? In some of the inconsistencies, maybe at the catch point, he is very physical, very handsy, which will be more of a problem at the NFL. You wonder about him on some of those level 3 routes, right? Just being disciplined, staying within himself, but ultimately, he's a guy that just needs snaps. For me, I think he just needs snaps, and I also think that he probably needs a transition to slot cornerback. I think that would translate really well for his game. I do think that he flashes real physicality as a run defender. He shows flexibility there. He put on some muscle this past season, but I didn't think he always had as many plays against the run as you would expect for all of those things, right? His play strength to me was a positive, and his open field tackling was good as well, but I thought his run support was more average because it didn't always show as often, like Kansas, for example. You just didn't feel the run support as often as you would have hoped in those spots, so that does need to get better for me ultimately. ultimately. But you go through the grades here. Reactive athleticism, ultimately for me, just had an average grade. The downhill quickness when working from half turn spots, some of the reactive short area quickness as well laterally. Hip transitions for me were smooth, but they didn't always show the best quickness. What I liked from his reactive athleticism, and this translates to press, we'll go to those two things, is that I thought he was very consistent, recognized the early release type, recognized an early stem, set himself up really well early, and then the way that he could kind of manage himself off of that through the rep is what really stood out. I actually gave him a better grade in all different coverage types than I did in any of his critical factors. I give him a plus grade in terms of ball skills. I end up giving him a good grade there because for me, he shows body control at the catch point. He shows a lot of the things that you want to buy into. Body control at the catch point, focus working through contact at the catch point. Length is just, it's not great, but it's fine for his size, though it can show up some issues. He does get boxed out at times by larger receivers, which is a little bit of a problem as well. Pushed off top of his routes, which can ruin some sustainability and sustaining kind of that connection. But he plays with really nice timing to find the football as well. So forces routes out of bounds. It's obviously just the fact that he is very physical and overly physical. Acceleration didn't always feel easy. The tracing ability when he fell in the trail position didn't always feel that loose or fluid. You'd see him fall on the ground way too often when he got in those spots where he would be like, hey, you got to recover, be comfortable here. Obviously, Cobee Bryant's experience showed because he was much more comfortable seemingly in those spots. I think he could speed up his close in terms of the plant and drive, and that could simply just come from anticipation. I didn't really think he showed the right anticipation to plant and drive and make that show up as much on the field. When he gets caught in the traffic, it looks a little bit more inconsistent, though he shows flashes of it. You're like, okay, you can see some of the movement here through traffic. It just didn't always show up incredibly well with some of the angles that he would take. Accelerate well, he can create bail, he can kind of redirect himself well, he can press down a line and then work himself backwards, retreat. He can do those things. It's just that he needs to make sure that he keeps his footwork underneath him. That way he can really maximize that specifically. Plus press corner. I think he's above average here. I think the knee bend was there. The balance that he would showcase was here. The two-handed jam was very physical. It would throw off routes. You could put him in the slot, which is what he would do. Put him in nickel sets. He'd jump into the slot just over 90 snaps this past season and some of those sub packages as well. He was powerful in those spots. He had the footwork to kind of mirror some of those release types, step on front of wide releases, and then also be able to kind of stick with it if he would overset because his hips wouldn't declare. He had really good control of his hips as a press corner. Strike a little bit off balance at times, which gave him some problems, but his ability to reset over top through physicality is an area where he felt pretty comfortable early on routes, and that gave me some Ennis Rakestraw vibes, of course, as a Lions fan. Now over to the off-man coverage. Again, I liked him. I thought he was very good in off-man coverage. Some slight knocks here, but I actually had a lot of positives from him in off-man coverage. I thought he had balance control, especially if you put him in more slot assignments where he's working like 4 yards off the ball. So he played with really good timing as an off-man corner, when to flip his hips, when to turn a run, not to do it too early, not to declare too early in those spots, not to just give up the blind spot because of that, or just really overplay things. Do a really nice job of keeping his hips down. Of course, he's naturally lowered to the ground, but we're pretty patient. I think ultimately here, though, you just saw some contact balance issues a little bit through contact. He could be a little bit late to transition, which could knock him into some trail spots as well. In zone coverage, again, I thought he was a positive player. I thought he was a good zone coverage corner. Connect and half-turn coverage, the way that he kind of just cut off routes that were working vertically through their stem, the way that he would really focus on protecting his leverage when working some zone coverage assignments, fly over top and bail coverage, maybe just doing too much in certain situations. But again, he played with low pads. He played with control. He could kind of handle double moves because of that, though he became a little bit leggy. You want to see him kind of play a little bit more condensed at times within his footwork. He act a little bit faster, and that reactive athleticism could earn a higher score than just average. As for Cobee Bryant, the flip side is I thought that he actually had some false movement at the top of his routes, which is just two different things between the two players. Ultimately, for me here, I would have liked to see a more dominant player against the run of Jacob Parrish from what I saw early versus as I continue to watch. I didn't feel as much, didn't feel as slippery against blocks. I don't know that how much he's going to actually be able to add. I think there is a little bit of stiffness in his game, and you'll see that in the way that kind of bends and turns the corner. I don't see as much of that. I also didn't see consistent shed ability, even though he's a little bit stronger. He didn't feel consistent shed ability. He could handle his own, but he didn't feel consistent shed. He'll fill gaps. He'll break himself down to play the run. There's a disciplined nature to breaking down to make tackles. I just think ultimately between the two here is just very different. I think Parrish, you could really bet on saying, oh, he has a higher upside. He's the younger player, but also things need to connect. He needs snaps, and I'm a little bit concerned that I don't think right away it's going to be great, but I think what will make him translate the fastest is put him in the slot. I think if you put Jacob Parrish in a slot, you play to his strengths more, you make sure that he's playing with the right physicality, which I think that he will, and then you allow him to kind of just play fast, be physical. If you allow him to get in that scheme where you kind of free him up to be his physical playing self, I think you put him in the slot and he's going to have a lot of success. On the flip side, I think Cobee Bryant, you want to lean more off-man coverage, zone coverage, minimize some of the concerns. He can do all of those things, but you have to do it in the right situation. And for him, understanding the situation, understanding the moment is going to be important because he does a really good job with the sticks, understanding saying, hey, he's got to get here on the play. How can I set myself? How much depth do I need to play with? But he may need to play faster in certain spots. Ultimately, put him in the right spot. You could have a higher floor. Ultimately, you can see on the final grades here, Jacob Parrish ended up as a 6.20 for me. As of now, these things will change as we get more players falling in. And I had Cobee Bryant at a 6.0 grade. Both players that I like. I think Parrish has a chance to go day 2. I'd be pretty surprised if Cobee Bryant went day 2. He's the back end of round 3. But that production could definitely help. And it's not like he's really bad in any areas for me specifically. It's just ultimately I don't know where he's special right now, and that's going to be the question. So with that being said, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'm out.